Yeah, we can start.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. What a pleasure
One,
to
one
be
moment,
here.
one
One
moment.
moment, because I haven't muted them yet.
Okay.
Yeah, now I'm unmuting them.
So yeah, I suppose we can start, Nastya.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
well,
David, I guess you can get started.
well, what a pleasure to be here with you. For me, it is morning. I am coming all the way to you from the town of Cochrane, which is located in the province of Alberta in the country of Canada. And I am David Falconer. I'm the founder and executive director of Classrooms Without Walls, and a strong supporter and friend of Ukraine. And what a pleasure to be here with you. I have been looking for this session, for a long time. Not because of what I'm going to share with you, but really because I wanted to see your faces. And there is nothing more pleasurable for me to be able to see the faces of students that are coming from various places to be together. It's amazing the power of technology. And you heard Bob McDonald yesterday, if you attended his session, how technology has allowed us to connect with each other. And here I am, thousands of kilometers away from where you live, and yet we're one. And so welcome. And I have a special session for you today. We're going to be talking about my travels. And specifically, I'm going to be talking to you about what it's like to live in the Amazon jungle. And what an experience that was. And I have to say that a lot of the things I'm going to be sharing with you are somewhat going to surprise you. Take a look at this guy here. Who do you think that is? That is me. That was well before I grew this white beard. That photograph was taken when I was actually entering grade 1. So I was about 6 years old. And my mom said, this is your first day of school, and I'm going to be taking you to a photographer so that we keep this photograph for posterity. And so here I am. At the time, I had no idea the many places that I would be visiting. And that's exciting about life when you think about it, isn't it? That you have all these years ahead of you that are going to be bringing to you all sorts of opportunities, experiences that are going to open up your minds and your eyes. But you know what's going to be even better? They're going to open up your heart. Because when you travel, you don't just simply learn about other places, other people. You learn about yourself. And for this little boy who, at the time, 6 years old, he had no idea where he was going to go in life. And take a look at all these places that I've been to. I have lived in 7 countries, lived. And I have traveled to over 70 different countries. And so you look at the one at the top, and that is with my youngest son. His name is Benjamin. I've been to the Atacama Desert, which is the most driest, arid desert in the world. And I have been to Tibet in China. I have been to Nepal. I have been to Myanmar, to Thailand, and has been exciting because I have learned a lot about other people. But again, more importantly, I've learned a lot about myself. I've also been an Army officer. Yes, in the Canadian Army. That is me. That is David Falconer. And I had no idea that at some point in my life, I would actually be in the Canadian Army. And I know that for many of you, you have family members that are in the Ukrainian Army. And I have to say to you is that, be proud of your family members who are there right now, supporting you, protecting you. And my love goes to the country of Ukraine. And so, again, like I said, lots of things have happened. And one of piece of my life, a little chapter of my life was being a young boy living in the Amazon rainforest. And what an experience that was. I had no idea that was actually going to happen. No idea. And yet it actually happened. And I want to share with you stories of what it was like to live in the Amazon rainforest, because the Amazon rainforest is unlike any other place that I've been to. The memories that I have, the things that I saw, the things that I experienced, the things that I ate, the things that I did there have been unlike anything else throughout my life. So that was me. That was me when I had my photograph taken and it was put in a passport, and I ended up going to the Peruvian Amazon jungle. That is me. I was 11 years old. How many of you are 11 years old right now or very close to that? I bet there are many, many of you that are that age. Imagine you being 10 or 11 or 12 or 13 and suddenly saying, hey, I'm going to go and live in the Amazon jungle. And not just that. Imagine going there and living there by yourself. What would that experience be like? What would it be like to go there, a place where you've never been to, and see things that are going to really, truly open your mind? And that's exactly what happened to me, 11 years old, and I ended up going to the Peruvian Amazon jungle. But let's just, before I get into some specifics about stories, if you don't know about the Amazon jungle, this is what it actually covers. When you look at South America, and here is a map of South America, look at the countries that it actually covers. So it goes from Bolivia down in the south, all the way up to Venezuela in the north, to Brazil in the east, and Peru and Ecuador, Colombia in the west. So it's a huge area, massive area. But yet, when you consider the size of the planet, it's actually not that big. But what it does for the rest of the world is amazing. Did you know that the Amazon jungle is known as the lungs of our planet? The lungs. Think about it. We have lungs. You have lungs. We breathe in this oxygen. And then because of that, our heart keeps moving, our blood gets recycled and clean and so on. And the reason why that happens is because of this wonderful oxygen that is produced in the Amazon jungle. And it's a lot of it. Of course, oxygen is being produced everywhere in Ukraine, in Canada, anywhere where there are green plants. And for me, going in there, I was not expecting to see the things that I saw, because it is so different. And what makes it different is the fact that it's near the equator, the line of the equator, which is what basically splits the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And it's so close to the equator that it's very hot. Now, think about hot in Ukraine. It gets hot, it gets humid. Now, increase that even more. Have you ever been to a sauna? Where you get into this room and there's a lot of steam and it's very hot. A lot of times that's what it felt like being in the Amazon. It was like being in a sauna. Now, in my case, I ended up going to the Peruvian Amazon, and that's where Peru is. When you think of South America, Peru is located on the west side of South America, and it's actually a fairly large country. And if you notice, it goes fairly down south to the tip of Chile, all the way up to basically very, very much just a little bit over the line of the equator. And because it's just so close to the equator, overall, the temperatures in Peru are warm, except if you end up going up into the Andes Mountains. And to get to the Amazon jungle, for me at the time when I was 11 years old, and this is going back to 1973. So here you can do the math and know how old, I am. It was a totally new experience. Now, just a little bit more about Peru. There's basically 3 regions in Peru. You have the coast region, which is this yellow section. So it's right next to the Pacific Ocean. And then you have the brown section here, which is where the Andes Mountains are. And then you have the green section, which is really where the Amazon jungle begins. And for me to go from the capital city, which is this one here, and this picture was taken very much later on. This is like someone like 40 years after I had first arrived in Peru. It was just an incredible place to be. Here is actually the capital city of Peru. Take a look at those beautiful buildings. That is the presidential palace. And the capital city of Peru is known as Lima. And I was so excited to be there because it had been 40 years since I had been there. And for me, there were lots of memories that were literally just coming into my mind and remembering what it had been like to have been there in Lima 40 years before these photographs were taken. Now, one of the things that I need to share with you is that when I was very young, I traveled a lot. Even before I actually left my country of birth permanently, my mom and dad would take me all around. They would take me to Peru, they would take me to Argentina, they would take me throughout the country of Chile to see the desert, to see the mountains and the snow in the south. It was a very exciting time, and I remember being young and traveling to Machu Picchu. Have you ever heard of Machu Picchu, where the Incas lived? The Incas were a strong group of people that basically were a major force in southern Peru and throughout Peru and, all the way up into Ecuador and Colombia and to down south of Chile. And they built incredible, incredible, incredible buildings. It's amazing the things that they did, because take a look at this particular building that the Incas built. That was built over 1,000 years ago, way up into the Andes Mountains. And the engineering is so perfect that if you were trying to put a blade between those stones, those bricks that you see there, you wouldn't be able to do that. That's how perfect these things are. And remember, this is like 1,500 years ago. They didn't have any of the fancy equipment that we have today. They had to cut these things with their hands. But obviously, they had tools that we're not aware of that managed to do these things. So for me, as I traveled, as a young boy, boy, oh boy, I tell you, there were so many things that I learned. Now, when I arrived in Peru, I arrived again in the city of Lima, which is a capital city, and then I had to travel into the Amazon jungle. How do you think you do that? Well, I was not very aware of the geography of Peru at the time. One of the things that I realized is that to get to the Amazon jungle, I first had to go over the Andes Mountains. And I tell you, back then, this is going back to 1973, 1974, to go into the Amazon jungle, the bus that we took had to travel and travel and travel and travel all the way up to the top of the Andes Mountains. This is actually one of the photographs that my brother took. And you're going to see most of my photographs are black and white photographs because there were not many people that actually took color photographs like today. But I remember going through these places and thinking, wow, this is amazing. Now, I had no idea how high up we would go. And I tell you, we went up and up and up and up. And one of the things that happens when you go very high up is that altitude, if you're not used to it, it really affects you. And I remember my head kind of being dizzy and wondering what's happening right now. Well, what was happening is that we kept going further and up and more higher than I had ever been before, to the point where we actually were close to 5,000 square meters above sea level. Have you ever been that high up in your life? Close to 5,000 meters above sea level. What happens at the time is that, I remember this, feeling very nauseous, not feeling well. The idea of eating or walking, I was dizzy. But the people that live in the Altiplano, and that's what that area is known as, they're used to it. They can play football and they can play games, they can run around. For people like you and I that are not used to living in such high altitude, it gets you really sick. And I remember sitting on that bus wondering, what's happening? I thought we were going to the Amazon jungle and I could not see anything green. But as soon as I got to the top, something happened. The bus began to go down and down and down and down. And the more it went down, the more green I saw. This area where I was actually going to, and this is a very old map. One of the things that I do is that I collect a lot of things. And this map that you're seeing there, it actually shows you the area where I was actually heading. It's known as the Valley of the Amazon. It almost sounds like a very famous movie, doesn't it? Or a very famous book, the Valley of the Amazon. And the areas that you see there in red, circle in red, is where I was actually heading. And suddenly, as it kept going further down and further down and further down, and we started going from the very high up Altiplano into the Amazon basin, it began to get more green and green and green and green. Take a look at this photograph. Do you see something in this photograph? Maybe it gets your attention. Take a look at the shape of this hill. Is there something there that you see in this hill? Take a look at it carefully, and then I'm going to share with you what people in the Amazon jungle call it. Okay, think about something there. Maybe you see. Think about it. Now I'm going to give you what people call this hill. They call it Sleeping Beauty. And if you look at it, you can see the head here on the left side. You can see the forehead. You can see a nose. You can almost see a mouth, the chin, and then the neck. And then you see the chest and the rest of the body. So people, I remember when I got there, they said, oh, that's Sleeping Beauty. And that's a photograph of me there. That was a photograph that my brother took of me in front of Sleeping Beauty. Now, I remember thinking, oh, now we got here. Well, guess what? We were not quite where we were going to. We still had to travel even more into the Amazon jungle. And to get to where we were going, we had to travel to this place, which was right next to a river, known as the Huallaga River. And to cross the Huallaga River, we had to cross in these little tiny, tiny, tiny canoes that were very narrow. And I remember crossing this river thinking, oh no, I'm going to be in trouble because something is going to hit this and I'm going to end up in the water. And I remember the flow of the water was just terrible. It was so strong, and there were trees at the time. There was a monsoon season. But we managed to cross into the other side. And I tell you, the river was huge, huge river, and it was brown. It was carrying a lot of mud, a lot of dirt, a lot of trees that had basically carved in, trees had fallen because of the strong rains, torrential rains. And we managed to get to the other side. And this is where I was actually heading to. A little tiny village in the middle of nowhere known as Tokache. And the people that lived there were indigenous to the area. They were actually from the Amazon. They had lived there for thousands of years. Think about this, thousands of years. So it had definitely, it was just a very, very, very different place to see. And when I got there, I ended up being enrolled in a school where they taught me how to basically go and take care of the farm that the school owned. And they gave me a machete. If you don't know what a machete is, it's actually a sword to both protect myself and to also use it to clear the field. Clear the field with, this machete, like just to cut the tall grasses and go pick coffee beans and stuff like that. And can you imagine in school in Ukraine being given a machete and you went to school with a machete? Well, that would not be allowed. In Canada, the same thing. You would not be allowed, but in the Amazon jungle, you had to, because it was just different. Take a look at this tree, the roots, the branches, how they just spread, and they spread for meters and meters and meters and meters away from where these trees are. And look how big, how wide these things are. Think about a tree in Ukraine. I think of a tree here in Canada. We just simply don't have trees like this.
Something went wrong. Please try again.
So very, very big. And these were the homes that you would see there. You can't quite see me, but my brother took a photograph of me. I'm standing right next to the entrance of this home here. That's me. Very, very different. So I'm going to stop right now for 1 second, and I'm going to ask Anastasia to maybe choose 3 or 4 students to ask me questions, and then I'll come back to my presentation. So Anastasia, you can pick any 3 or 4 from the audience this evening, and they can ask questions.
Okay, I don't see Nastya. I suppose something with internet connection. So we can ask Kira.
Okay, Kira. Love
What's
to hear
your
question.
favorite place where you've been? And do in Amazon is like як сказати ялинки?
Okay, so
Christmas tree.
Okay. Did I hear Kira's question correct? Is she asking my favorite place in the Amazon? Is that what she asked?
Kira, це то питання? Найулюбленіше місце? Yeah, it is.
Well, Kira, I'm going to share with you a story in about 2 minutes. And I will share with you some of my favorite experiences that I had. If you like snakes, if you like spiders, if you like killer ants, I have stories to share with you in 1 minute.
Snakes.
Okay, so another question.
My second question is, do in Amazon you have like there's trees? Допоможіть, будь ласка, як сказати ялинка?
Christmas trees.
Christmas trees.
Do you
Artie?
have in
Uh-huh.
Amazon
Yes.
Christmas trees?
Ah, well, no, this is so different. Kira, it's an excellent question. No, this was different. There was no Christmas, nothing. This was it was very different. And especially back in the 1970s, there was no internet. It was very isolated. There was no radio. There were no newspapers. There was no post office. Very different. And I'll share with you some of the experiences that I had. So maybe if you can give me just another, let's go to the next questions, and then I'll share with you some of the stories, Kira, that I'm sure you'll enjoy hearing.
Yeah, we can move on. Anastasia, I can give your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Artem. So let's talk to Lida this time.
So my real name is Lada, and there is my classmate is called Halid. So my question is, did you been at Amazon?
What did I do in the Amazon?
Yeah.
I was actually a student, Lida, and I think this is actually a perfect time to actually share with you a story. I think you're ready for the story. Let's start with the first one, okay? So let me just go here. So
My real
I
name
met...
is Lada. Lydia is my baby sister.
Okay, my apologies. So stories. I met many indigenous people there. And as you can tell, back then in the 1970s, they lived very much like their ancestors lived. They wore very little clothes, and they did a lot of hunting. And they would, hold on to these spears, and they had arrows and bows and arrows, and they moved from one place to the next. And being 11 years old, I was excited about seeing these things. It was so different. It was like being in a movie. And I remember that I would travel into places that, yes, I should have not traveled to, but I did, because I wanted to see. I wanted to see what the Amazon was like. And I met these friends that would say to me, David, let's go deep into the forest to see what it's like. Well, I saw many snakes, many snakes, and snakes of different sizes. And here's my first story that I will share with you. I was actually going to school, and I was in grade 7 at the time. And I remember hearing my friend, suddenly hear a friend's voice saying, David, come over here. And I remember hearing his voice and thinking, oh my goodness, where is it coming from? Because I could not see him. But I kept walking, and the more I walked, his voice got louder and louder and louder. And I remember suddenly noticing that he was at the bottom of the hill. And I remember walking down this hill. Suddenly he says to me from a distance, he says, don't get any closer. And I said, why not? He says, don't move. And he said, take a look what's down here on the ground. And I remember sort of trying to pay attention, and it was kind of hard to see because there was a lot of tall grass. He said, do you see it? And I said, is that what I think it is? And he said, yes. And suddenly what I realized is that there was a huge anaconda snake lying there on the ground. And I remember him looking at me, and he was actually from the Amazon. He said to me, this is a very huge snake. And I remember just my eyes were just wide like this, looking at it and thinking, I have never seen a snake this big. And I remember he said to me, he says, David, do you want to touch it? Now, put yourself in my position. This is the biggest snake that you have ever seen. And a friend says to you, come and touch it. Would you touch it? Well, kind of crossed my mind. I thought, ooh, I think I do want to touch it. And I remember I got very close and I put my hand on top of its skin. And I remember touching it and feeling it kind of sweaty. It felt like almost like touching a fish. It was like the scales. It was just like cold, but the colors were just amazing. Now, as I was touching it, one of the things that happened is that my friend ended up running away. And I remember looking at him and thinking, where is he going? It was then that I suddenly realized that to my left side, the head of the snake was looking at me. Now, I don't have a photograph of that, but I did a drawing of it, and it was kind of, there, sort of looking at it like this, and the snake, and suddenly imagine the snake kind of looking at me. And I remember my heart just racing, scared. I was terrified. I thought, I need to get out. But you know what happened to me? I froze. I don't know if it's ever happened to you. My body suddenly just froze. I could not move. And I remember in my head wanting to say something, wanted to do something, and my legs were just totally frozen. And the snake kept getting closer and closer and closer to me. And it was suddenly that I felt my legs kind of move, and I remember just running as fast as I could from this huge snake. After that, I tell you, I knew not to get near snakes. One of the things about anacondas and boa constrictors is that they're not poisonous. What they do is they grab you and then they squeeze you. It's like they want to give you a strong hug. And when they're hugging you, that's when you're in trouble. And I knew that after this experience, I was just simply not going to ever do this again. And I learned my lesson from this, but this was my first ever very, very close encounter with snakes. The next one, and this I learned after, is that I actually went to bed. And now remember, none of you live in the Amazon. You don't need to worry about this. But I remember going to bed one day when I was very, very tired. And oh, you know something? I'm going to hold on to this thought for a few more questions, and then I'll share the rest of the story. Let's see here, a few more questions.
Yeah, how about Yehor?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, what was the hardest language to learn?
What was I'm sorry, can you repeat that
The
part?
hardest language to learn.
The language. It's an excellent question. So the people there spoke their native language, but the main language, the official language at the time, because now they've added more languages, the official language of the people there was Spanish. And I speak Spanish. Yo hablo español. Yo lo hablo muy bien. And so I could speak to people. So everybody spoke Spanish. And when they didn't want me to understand what they were saying, they would begin to speak their native language. And there were times when it would actually kind of make me upset, because it was like, hey, I want to understand what you're saying. And I could not understand what they were saying. But Spanish was, when they wanted to speak to me, they would speak in Spanish. Do any of you know any Spanish words? Maybe hola, buenos dias, buenas tardes, buenas noches. So it's a good language to learn because a lot of people around the world speak it. Any other questions?
Yeah, what about Alexi?
I now live in Spain, so I can speak Spanish a little bit.
Muy bien, señorita. ¿Qué palabras sabes?
No comprendo.
Well, you're learning it. And you know something? At your
Yeah.
age, at your age, you're going to learn it very fast. This is the best time to learn a language when you're young. When you get to be like grandpa, like me, it becomes very, very difficult. But when you're young, you're like a sponge. You just absorb everything, and your brain is just in a perfect stage where, things are picked up very fast. Anybody else would like to ask a question?
Yeah, how about Light 9? But I guess your name is different.
Sorry, I don't understand what I need to do.
Ask a question. But if you don't have a question, then lower your hand, please.
Question about this picture.
About today's topic, about the Amazon.
Okay. In Amazon we do spiders live in Amazon? Spiders.
Anastasia, I wonder if you could repeat Light 9 question?
Yeah, I didn't quite understand it. So, Lightning, can you please repeat it?
Okay, I will say it in Ukrainian because I don't understand how to say it in English.
Okay.
Чи живуть пауки в Амазоні?
Do spiders live in Amazon?
Oh, I have a story about spiders, Light 9. So give me 1 second. Let's move to more stories. And then you will hear a spider story. So that's me there.
Okay.
I was living by myself a lot of the time. And I did not have a washer. There was no dryer. So I wore the same pants and the same top for a long time. Kind of terrible to say, but I didn't even have a toothbrush. I didn't have toothpaste. So can you imagine not brushing your teeth for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks? Not a healthy thing, is it? Sometimes we're tired and we go to bed without brushing our teeth, but imagine not brushing your teeth for a long time, and especially, a very humid place. So I was sweating all the time, but unfortunately, where I lived, the people did not have anything for me to wash my clothes in. So it was not easy. Now, take a look at these things here. What are these things? Are these little things that you would have in a fishbowl? No. These are known as piranhas. And piranhas like to eat, and especially anything that has meat and bones. And so one of the things that I realized was that I always had to be careful where I would go to swim. That's actually a photograph of me, because one of the things that I would do is that I would go to a local creek that was nearby, and I would swim in it. And that was what I would do, just get wet, because I didn't have any soap. Imagine too, not having any soap. So again, no toothbrush, not toothpaste, and no soap. What do you think I smell like? and no perfume, no deodorant. So, but one of the things that people said to me when I said to them, hey, I'm actually going to, swim in this creek, they said, do you realize that there are piranhas there? And I said, what? And I had no idea. And so that was kind of the last time that I ever went into that particular creek. I did not want to bath there ever again. So things that you kind of learn when you're not from an area, from a country, from a neighborhood or a country community where you've ever lived before, there are a lot of things that you don't know. And for me, I definitely did not know a lot of things about being in the Amazon. So spiders. Oh my goodness gracious. Who knows about spiders? Well, I learned a lot about spiders. There were all sorts of huge spiders. Can you see this big, massive, hairy, ugly spider on the screen? Where they were all around where I lived. And people would often say to me, David, you need to be careful. You need to always check where you are, make sure that there are no spiders. So here's my next spider story. And now remember, There are no spiders like this in Ukraine. So you don't need to worry about this. It's not like, you know, you need to worry about what's in your bed or what's on the couch or what's underneath your dining room table. Again, Ukraine is a very safe place to be when it comes to spiders. So one of the things that I remember is that I had to, you know, be at school all day. We had been working out on the farm. We had been cutting sugar cane and picking coffee beans and taking care of pigs. We had pigs. And I remember getting back to my room kind of late in the afternoon, and I was exhausted, Gregory. I was exhausted. Lada and Eva and Adrian and everybody that I see here, Kira, I was just like so tired. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm going to go to sleep. And I remember lying on my bed and trying to go to sleep, but something woke me up. I don't know if you've ever had that feeling of something being in the room or something watching you. Have you ever had that experience? And I remember sort of kind of opening my eyes and thinking, there's something funny that I'm feeling right now, but I couldn't quite grasp what was happening. And I remember trying to go back to sleep, and I closed my eyes and I tried to go to sleep again. But again, that feeling that something was in the room came back. And it was like, come on, David, you're imagining things, just go back to sleep. And I remember trying to close my eyes again. And again, that feeling that something, Gregory, was in my room. Something was watching me. Something was there. And I remember in the darkness, kind of, you know, trying to listen. And I could not hear anything, Eva and Adrian and Kira and Lada. Again, I know that there are more of you present. I can't see your names, but I could not hear anything. But I could feel that something was in the room. And I remember thinking, I can't go to sleep. So I grabbed my matches because there was no electricity. And I lit my candle, tried to figure out if I could see something in the room. And I remember grabbing the matches, lighting the candle, and I remember using the candle to sort of look around, and I could not see anything. And I thought, oh, I'm imagining things. So I thought, okay, just try to go to sleep, David. Well, I closed my eyes and I tried to go to sleep. And again, that feeling of there's something in the room came back. It was then that I lay down and there was actually, opened my eyes, and right above my head, and this is a drawing of it, there was a huge spider just hanging above my head. Now, picture this, a big, hairy, ugly, humongous spider hanging right above your head. What do you do at this moment? What would you do at this moment? I need to tell you though, my heart was just racing. I was so totally, my eyes were like 5 times the size, looking at the spider as it was actually kind of looking at me and saying, David, I'm about to fall on your face. And I remember looking at him, I just froze there. My heart was just racing at 100 miles an hour. And I remember that it was at that moment that I just jumped out of the bed so fast. And I went to the middle of the room. And I remember looking at this ugly, hairy, humongous, gigantic spider just hanging from its web right above my pillow. I thought, I can't go back to my bed. And I remember just looking at it. It was so huge. And I remember hearing the voices of my friends saying, David, you always need to check where you are for spiders. And oh my goodness gracious. I thinking, I just went to bed. I never checked. And I remember I thought, I can't go back to bed. Lada, would you go back to bed with a spider, or Eva or Adrian? You know, go back to bed with a spider like that hanging just above your pillow? Well, I agree with you. I didn't. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do? It was then that I grabbed a broom And I thought, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to grab the broom, I'm going to hit it as hard as I can. And I remember grabbing the broom and I thought, I'm just going to hit it like it was a baseball bat, like hitting a baseball. And I thought, that's how I'm going to do it. And I remember I grabbed that broomstick and I went like this to the side like this. And I just did as fast as I could, like a swing, as strong as a swing as I could. And I hit the spider from underneath, but I made a mistake. Rather than do a full swing, I ended up lifting the spider from underneath. The next thing I know, the spider is kind of flying towards me. And I'm going like, no. Imagine a spider coming towards you like this. And it was like it was slow motion, just coming towards you, kind of going. And that's when I moved to the side and it landed on the floor. And well, I knew for a fact that I was not going to go to sleep with a big spider like that. So I used my broom and I hit it as hard as I could. And all I know is that I remember seeing its legs kind of go like this. And it was kind of in shock. And then I grabbed the candle and I pour wax on it. And I pour wax and wax and wax and wax and wax, as much wax as I could on top of this big spider. And I remember I went to bed and I remember waking up the next morning thinking, oh, what a nightmare I had. Except that when I looked in the middle of the room, there in the middle of the room, there was a wax. And underneath this wax mound of wax, you know, that little hill, was a spider that was kind of frozen in time there and now could not move. So I grabbed a shovel and I just threw it out of my room. But I tell you, it was an experience that I will never forget. These are the places where I lived. Lots of banana trees and snakes and spiders and all sorts of things that I had never, ever seen before. This is actually the area where I lived. And again, just humidity and hot. And it was just so incredible. I know for adults, you know, that had never been to a place like this, it would be very difficult. But because I was young, you know, I was 11, 12 years old at the time, I got used to it. So let's have a few more questions because we only have about 10 minutes left. I can't believe this. A few more questions. So Anastasia or Artem, if you could please pick 4 students to ask me questions.
Sure. So how about Adrian? You haven't spoken yet.
How big, what color is the snake for your scene? What color are they?
The color. Okay, well, I need to tell you that it was a mosaic. I don't know if you've heard that word before. Mosaic is basically, it's just different things together, put together. And I remember, and I can still see it in my head. I'm actually looking at it right now as I'm describing it to you. It was just had different colors. It had little greens, and there were little reds and little blues and little browns and different shades of these colors. And I remember touching it, and it just felt so cold and sweaty. It was like my hand, as I put my hand on the snake, it was just like smooth. It's like very smooth. But the colors, it was just very like different colors. It was perfect. It was a camouflage. It was perfect because it could hide amongst the tall grasses and you could not see it unless you were paying close attention to it. And that's how they catch, that's how they catch their victims, deer and birds and also monkeys and so on. They don't see it because they're hiding in the tall grass, or sometimes they're up in trees. And suddenly they step on them, and as they step on them, they're very fast. They grab you, and then they begin to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. And when the animal is, dies, what they do is that they swallow it whole. They don't chew. Like you and I, when we have something like, we want to eat, we chew it. Well, Big snakes like this, they don't chew, or any snakes, they don't. What they do is that they swallow you whole. And then the victim digests in the tummy, and then you're basically food. So I remember seeing snakes that had just eaten something, and you could see, like the snake, but then in the middle, you could see almost like, you could tell that there was something in it. And sometimes it could be, something like a small squirrel type animal, and that they had eaten. So, but different colors. Okay, another question.
Yeah, how about Alina? What surprised you the most?
Ah, fantastic question. The beetles. I used to collect beetles. I loved collecting beetles. And they were the most amazing beetles that I had ever seen in my life. Now, take a look at the size, take a look at the hand. Now, take a look at your hand and say, okay, how big is this beetle? These are the normal size beetles that you find in the Amazon jungle. So one of the most amazing things that for me, that I used to just love seeing, and I used to collect them. I had a collection of beetles where just the shapes of these things. And I was always looking for beetles, always looking for beetles. And if I found them, and there were lots of dead beetles that I would find, I would put them in a box and I would keep them there. And I'm so sad that I never carried that box with me, but because I didn't know where I was actually going to be heading next, I had to throw a lot of stuff in the garbage, or I had to give it away. But I remember my collection, my beetle collection, and the other one was butterflies. Oh, the butterflies that I saw, and again, look at this beetle. Take a look at the shape. They're almost prehistoric. It's almost like you're going back 1,000,000 years in time. And by the way, they were safe. The majority of the beetles were safe. Like you could touch them. Now, did they feel kind of weird on your hand? Yes. Sometimes I would put them on my shoulder, and sometimes they would purpose, like, I could feel them crawling up my snake, my neck. And, sometimes I would have them crawl onto my head, and sometimes they would sit on my head, and I would walk around the town, with a beetle sitting on my head. So I got used to these things, but definitely beetles and butterflies were things that I was always looking for. Take a look at these beautiful butterflies. Butterflies that I have never seen, and huge butterflies. So any other questions?
Yeah, let's talk to Anna.
My name is Maria.
Hello, Maria.
Tell and ask, have you ever seen a pink dolphin in the Amazon? I know they live there.
Yes, they do. And you know where they live? They live near the Orinoco River. The Orinoco River, it enters through the Atlantic Ocean near Venezuela. And that's where these pink-looking dolphins live. And they enter into the Amazon. And unfortunately, I have never seen one, but I have actually been to the Orinoco River. And this is like when you think of the Amazon River, which is the biggest, largest volume-wise river in the world, the Orinoco River is huge. They actually have ships that go right into the river. Imagine a big ship going into the river. And that's where these beautiful dolphins live. And I wish I had seen any, but unfortunately never. Maybe I will have the opportunity later on to see one, but I know exactly what you're talking about. One more question, because we only have 5 minutes left. Oh no.
Yeah, let's talk to Alice.
I want to show the butterfly that I took a picture.
Ah, you took a picture of a butterfly. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay,
Oh.
then let's talk to Zlata maybe. One more.
Slada.
I wanted to ask you, was the size of butterflies the same as are like usual in your like the other world?
Oh, Slada, the size. Take a look at your hand. Take a look at your hand. Now, there were butterflies, Slada. They were 2-3 times the size of your hand. Now, the amazing
Wow.
thing, Slada, is that these things, they travel hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. Now, you would think such a delicate, such a fragile little insect, you know, but they did. And they would travel from one place to the next. And they were amazing, but huge butterflies. Now, one more question. I see Anastasia's hand go up. It's been up for quite some time. Anastasia.
Good day.
Question.
Good day. I have any question. What animal which located in the forest Amazon?
Oh, fantastic question, Anastasia. Let me see. Okay, so in terms of birds, one of my favorite birds was the toucan. And what was amazing about this, it was its beak, because it's huge. I mean, think of today when you go out, take a look at a Ukrainian bird, you know, that lives in your neighborhood, in your community. The beak is just a tiny little thing. You know, the toucan has a massive beak, but more than anything for me was the colors. The colors were just amazing. It was like, did somebody paint that colors, you know, on the beak of this bird? And I tell you, they were beautiful. Now, in terms of things that were amazing, I got to see these. They had these red face. Oh my goodness gracious. I just like, I remember just looking at these things and they almost looked like they were upset. You know, sometimes when people get upset, their faces get red. Well, there were a lot of these around. And I remember just looking at these things and going like, wow. And you know what happened is that because I lived there for a long time, after a while, I would not really pay close attention to these things. Imagine these things around me. And I had to be very careful because, again, there were all sorts of very dangerous things around, like this is where the last story goes. And we only have literally like a minute and a half left. Killer ants. One of my friends said to me, there's an anthill on the way to school, David, that you must be careful about. And I said, why? Because there are some killer ants there. I said, what do you mean killer ants? Yes, these are huge ants. And if they bite you, it hurts a lot. And it's not just one, they will climb up your legs and many of them will bite you. And if many of them do, they can actually kill you. And I remember thinking, wow, well, one day when I was by myself, I did not listen to my friend. I just went and I went really close to the anthill and I wanted to see these things. And I remember standing right next to it when suddenly I felt something climbing up my leg, my left leg. I will never forget this, my left leg. And I remember thinking, uh-oh, what's going on here? And then I felt another thing climbing up my left leg and another and another. The next thing I know, David was doing a dance. I was jumping up and down, up and down, up and down, trying to get these things off my leg. But that was a mistake because what happened is that then they thought I was attacking them. The next thing I know, do you see these teeth here? They begun to literally just like put their teeth right into my skin. Oh my goodness, the pain that I experienced, it was terrible. It was terrible. And my leg, my left leg after that was inflamed. Think of a mosquito bite. Think about that being 10 times bigger. So I learned after that to be very careful because I was living in the Amazon jungle, which brings me to the end of my story. I have more stories to tell you, but for today, that's me walking away. I used to wear a hat with spiders, you know, and I would just travel this path all the time and basically venture into what was an amazing period in my life. And I want to thank you all for being here today. I don't know, Anastasia, if there's any time for anybody to ask one last question.
Oh, okay, but I guess only one because we have the next class at 7 p.m. Okay, so how about Diana? A very quick last question.
Have you eaten any unusual food, and what was it?
Oh, I was kind of wondering whether or not somebody was going to ask me this question. Deanna, yes, I did. Okay, I'll just mention one. I did eat and I liked snake. There was actually, you know, there's an old saying. People will often say, it tastes like chicken. I'm not going to lie to you. It didn't taste like chicken, but it did actually have kind of a delicious, almost like chicken fishy, like a bit of a fish flavor. And I have to say that I loved the flavor. So a lot of time people would kill snakes because they need to keep safe, and they would cook them. So they did not throw anything away. And I remember eating a snake and going like, wow, this is kind of delicious. So I will stop there because I did eat other things, but I'm not going to share those with you today. So anyway, my love to all of you. It's been a pleasure being with you today. My love for Ukraine and for everything that you know you're doing to be together as a big family. As you know, I was in Ukraine back in March. I planning to come back. And anyway, I wish you a peaceful evening. And remember, there are no tarantulas or big snakes in Ukraine, so you don't need to worry about any of these at night.
Yes, thank you so much, David, for making this class. Thank you. It was so interesting to listen to you. And bye-bye. Have a nice day and see you soon very.
Bye.
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 So
Bye.
thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.